Good afternoon, everybody. It's just gone 4 p.m. No, sorry, 3 p.m. in South Africa, and it's time for this week's webinar. It's really exciting to be with you. I've said it's 3 p.m. in South Africa, but I know we have got many guests from other parts of the world. So welcome to this webinar on abalone. It's the first in a series of 3 webinars. This one dealing with abalone. Next week, we'll be discussing mussels, and the week after that, oysters. I'm really excited to bring you this from where I'm coming from, which is Aquaculture Africa magazine, soon to be known as Aquaculture Africa Media. But this webinar has been made possible primarily by Trade Forward Southern Africa. They've done some work in supporting the shellfish sector in South Africa and in Namibia, and they have made this webinar this afternoon possible. I can see the room is still filling up. We've had well over 700 people register for this webinar. A very high percentage of those 700 will watch the recording afterwards. We've got about, I think, about 130 or so in the room at the moment. And we're ready to get rolling with a very full program this afternoon. As I said, this is webinar 1. I will share some details about the other webinars as we go through this afternoon's program. Just some basics. Many of you know exactly how webinars work, but please use the chat panel to say hi. It's always nice to see who's online, who's chatting. There's often, if you want to share your email address on the chat, you're welcome. I can see there are people joining us from the Seychelles and from Egypt and from several other countries. Welcome to all of you. I can see Nigeria, Somalia, Zambia, Sudan. If I run through here quickly, let's have a look. Not quite sure. It's really a wide variety of guests. Obviously, many people from South Africa, but please say hi to us. I see Michael has just linked in from Vietnam, Jonathan from Ghana, and Dr. Ahmed, my old friend from Egypt. Welcome to all of you this afternoon. So say hi on the chat panel. It's great to hear from you. Use the question and answer panel for your questions. We'll take a discussion at the end of the webinar, and we'll try and answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. Park your questions in the Q&A because it's easier for us to find them there as opposed to looking for them in the chat panel. This webinar is recorded. Many people will watch the recording afterwards. You will also get the link to the recording in your email tomorrow, together with a link to the presentation slides. I can also tell you that at the end of this webinar, we'll share the email addresses of the speakers. And the only other thing that I've got to say is for you to sit back, relax, and learn about this really interesting sector within the greater framework of aquaculture in South Africa. As I've already said, we've got 3 webinars. Today's one is on abalone. On the 16th of February, we'll cover mussels. And on the 23rd of February, we'll be talking about oysters. I will give you those details to register for those respective webinars as we go through the program. If we have a look at our program today, it's really full. I actually want to get on with the work that's ahead. I'm going to step off with this introduction quite soon, and then I'll hand over to Mr. Sim Dube from Trade Forward Southern Africa. I will then hand over to Andrea Benitzida, who's the Director of Aquaculture Research and Development at the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. We'll have a short video clip on abalone. Then we'll be joined by Sarah Hulse from Abagold. She's going to give us an overview of South African abalone, of the sector. We will have an input by Tian Prim, who's the chair of the Abalone Export Council. I will do a short presentation on the work from TFSA, and then I'll ask Johan Hackroot to give us his input from the Abalone Farmers Association of South Africa. As I said, a very full program, so I want to get moving. On that note, I want to go straight over to Sim Dube. Sim is from Trade Forward Southern Africa. And as I said at the start, they have made this webinar series possible. Sim, are you able to open your camera and give us your opening remarks? Thank you, Sim.
Thank you very much, Etienne. For some reason, I cannot get my video playing, but I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. We'll have a look into that problem on our side as well, but please continue.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Etienne. I think for us, really, as Trade Forward Southern Africa, this is an honor to actually be in amongst experts in this sector. I think we really have to show that appreciation and enjoy this topic today. So from my side, really, I'll not take too much time in terms of, course, there's get experts here. We're going to be talking about the subject. I just want to talk about the project Trade Forward Southern Africa, who we are, what we aim to do, and how we collaborate with yourselves. So we are a 3-year project, which is funded by the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, popularly known as FCDO. And really, we work in the 6 Southern African countries. For want of a better word, it's actually the SACU countries, including Mozambique. How is it that we get involved with sectors like yourselves? The program aims to give capacity building and technical assistance to help grow trade and find targeted solutions to improve, especially gender equality. We're very strong on that. And we really want to alleviate poverty across the SACU plus M region, which I've just mentioned. So our key objectives, our key intervention areas are around information and trade promotion. We do offer online training under our School of Export, where we actually, our partners can have access to actually access our modules, as across about 21 modules that we have at the moment, on anything on exporting, and also have an LMS system as well there that's really, it's actually an LMS system, learner management system that we have there, free of charge. That's what we offer to our partners. We also do a lot of work around value chains. We've really taken time to identify the value chains that we work in. And as you know, aquaculture is clearly one of the value chains. And we also work under trade and customs training to ensure that our exporters are quite clear in terms of what they need to do to export. And we are very deliberate and very strong working around women in trade. So we support women across the region to help them also be part of the mainstream economy. So that's the work that we're doing. And today, as we all know, we're actually working with the value chain that we've selected, which is aquaculture. And just looking at the attendance in this webinar, it's pretty obvious why aquaculture is a sector to support. We're quite aware that it's one of the fastest growing food sectors globally, and is considered a key sector for future food production. So it makes sense that we support this. And we know that if farmed responsibly, aquaculture bears huge promises. So we really see the reason to support this kind of work. So we have worked with our partners, we call them business support organizations under aquaculture, to actually ensure that we give this necessary support where possible to promote these exports. And we've actually collaborated with one of our partners in updating the South African roadmap to EU compliance to the South African aquaculture sector. So this session, this workshop really, amongst experts, is a discussion around this, especially with Abalone in mind. And we really want to make sure that we can access as much as possible for our partners, can access export markets. We as TFSA are actually here to support that work. And we're pretty happy to have you here and talking to us. I think maybe I'll just leave all the time to other experts to talk. Thank you, Etienne.
Great, Tim. I'm not going to let you off the hook. I think our challenge with cameras have been sorted out, and we're going to have to show people what you look like. Tim, if you can open your camera, then at least I can proudly say that we all know what you look like, and we all can look forward to seeing you. When we see you again, at least we can recognize you. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. I hope you can see me now. Technology has been sorted out, so I hope you can see me. If not, I'll try.
Yes, great, Sim. It would be a pity if you did all of that makeup beforehand, just for us not to be able to open up the camera.
Great. Thank you, Tim.
Great. Sim, thank you very much for those words. I think some people that are listening online will be excited by the work that TFSA are doing. And I want to invite everybody to have a look at those free training tools around export and the free lectures and courses that are provided by TFSA. it's certainly worth, whether you're in aquaculture or any other commodity, it's certainly worth looking at. Right, on with our program. None of this sector would be possible without the hard work of government. A lot of my friends and colleagues work in the South African government department responsible for aquaculture, and sometimes they get the raw end of the deal because we all blame them. But essentially, this sector would not be where it is without people like Andrea Bernazida, who is the Director of Aquaculture Research. Andrea, you can unmute. You're welcome to share screen, and please give us your opening remarks.
Okay, thanks, Etienne. Just checking that you can see my screen.
Yes, 100%. Thank you, Andrea.
Okay. Thanks for the invitation, Etienne. Good afternoon. 3 o'clock on our side. Etienne hasn't stolen an hour from us here. To the panelists and participants that have joined this discussion. I think safe to say the work that I'm presenting is really a team effort from within our department and other competent authorities responsible for aquaculture in South Africa. I just wanted to flag a few things before we go into the video. So a couple of things is that we've obviously identified aquaculture as an important sector for growth. One, in terms of creating sustainable job opportunities. I think, as Sim said, especially in terms of women and youth employment, economic development, it's around abalone specifically is capitalizing on export opportunities, stimulating rural development and livelihoods. A lot of the abalone farms are very close to the coastal environment, attracting foreign direct investment. A key part being Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment is also ensuring a sustainable sector and creating opportunities for SMMEs in the aquaculture sector. So that's broadly why and the priority around growing the aquaculture sector. Then just to flag a few initiatives, there's obviously a broad range of initiatives, but that relate to the diversification and growth of the aquaculture sector in terms of market. We've developed a South African aquaculture certification framework to guide our initiatives around the 4 pillars: food safety, aquatic animal health, environment, animal welfare, socioeconomics, in line with international standards. We also update and implement the food safety monitoring programs, especially for invertebrates, in line with local and relevant international standards, and in collaboration with various competent authorities. The work that is being discussed at this webinar is really in line with that, and we take very important research that has been done in this regard and then incorporate it into our food safety monitoring programs. We've also developed a public awareness and marketing strategy for aquaculture products in the sector. And specifically around abalone, we've looked at simplifying the sale of farmed abalone in the local market in order to diversify the market. And then from my directorate, we do continuous research on improving existing farming technology and sustainability in collaboration with industry. It's a fantastic relationship, and this currently includes a strong focus towards integrated multi-trophic aquaculture systems, but all of that has to be in line with biosecurity and food safety, so they're all interlinked. So some of the things around activities that have been done around the public awareness and marketing strategy. For the local market, we've developed various recipe books to help educate the public around what they can do with our aquaculture products and also seafood in general. There's an aquaculture value chain proposition. And then what we'll be looking at now is we've developed 6 videos for the primary species that are farmed, including abalone. The one video Etienne will show now. We've also done in-flight campaigns and airlines and magazines, and we continuously do social media campaigns within our own social media pages from DFFE. Thank you. I'm keeping it short so that you can look at the visual representation in the video. Thank you, Etienne.
Great, thank you, Andrea. Always nice to have your input. I am going to call up the video clip onto the screen. If you are having any bandwidth challenges with watching the video clip, we will put the video clip link into your email tomorrow. So if it's difficult to follow the video, please bear with us. Some people with limited bandwidth might struggle, but I will certainly share that clip with you. Lots of comments coming through on the chat panel. Henrique from Mozambique, Melinda, Angola. I wish I could greet everybody. We've got people as far away as Jamaica. Leanne, really welcome. Nice to have you join us as well. We've got well over 200 people in the room and a full session this afternoon. I'm going to try and share the video clip. Please enjoy it for a few minutes. It's a really interesting insight into abalone.
We're very blessed to farm a very unique species, one of the top species of abalone in the world and highly regarded for its quality. My name is Jacques du Plessis. I've been in the South African abalone farming industry for the last 20 years. South African abalone farming industry farms with a very unique species called Haliotis midday. What makes our product unique is that it's fed by the pristine waters from this beautiful coastline.
Our abalone is farmed through all the life stages. We have a collection of broodstock, which we condition on a regular basis to produce eggs and larvae, and take them through all the life stages and take them through the production system until they reach a size that could be marketed.
Farming abalone is not only keeping them alive in the tanks, it's actually making them to grow. And then all that intrinsic factors like their age, their weight, the species, and all that stuff, it's to be taken into account when you measure with the aquaculture species.
In South Africa, we farm abalone on land with pump assure systems. So we pump water from the sea into our abalone tanks and it flows back to the sea. We do work on quite a lot of things to make this better. We work on renewable energy. We work on always trying to make our footprint smaller. We feed natural seaweeds to our abalone together with their feed.
So to make sure that our product is safe to eat, we have a HACCP system in place, which is a food safety program. We got audited every year, twice a year, by the NRCS from the government to make sure that we do stick to the rules and regulations. We also do internal auditing. And we also have a HACCP external company that is come every year, once a year, to do an annual auditing, also to make sure that we do stick to the rules and regulations from the government side.
Sustainability is very, very important to us. We need to think about the future. We need to think about the future of this farm, about the people that work here, their families, their kids growing up. So whatever we do it for a stable future going forward.
A lot of people that started working at Aquaculture Mumbai didn't have any experience at all. That is why the management staff of Aquaculture makes sure to give training to those people.
And Zeker's Bay Sea Products is actually a well-known employer amongst the people in South Africa. There's current stream of CVs coming in for people that actually want to be employed here, because 100% of all our workers that comes in here becomes permanent employees.
South African abalone is one of the most valuable species of abalone in the world, and it's very recognizable because of its light white shell, and often referred to by the Chinese as the blonde abalone. It's also recognizable because of the beautiful frills that is abundant in the abalone, and it's got a very good shell to meat ratio.
Great. I'm sure many of you that are online, excuse me for the background sound, we just need to stop that. There we go. I'm sure that many of you that are online have not eaten abalone before, and I'm hoping that that little video clip actually gets you curious enough to go out and try abalone. I've tried it, I've loved it, I don't eat enough of it, but certainly that little video clip, I'm sure, is going to spark a lot of interest. We've heard some basics on abalone, but now we need to get into the more advanced information. We are joined today by Sarah Hulse from Abagold. She is the Research and Sustainability Manager at Abagold. I had to beg, borrow, and steal her time. She's a very busy person, but she knows a lot more about abalone than I do. And Sarah, it's an honor for us to have you online with us. I know you've worked really hard on this presentation. You can go ahead, share your screen, and take us through your material. Thank you.
Thanks, Etienne. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, there we go, Sarah. We can see your screen. You can just go into presentation mode. Perfect.
Is it? Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, so the Haliotis midi, the South African abalone. I think first things first, if you didn't see it from that awesome video, what is an abalone? It's not a fish. So abalone are marine mollusks or snails, and there's about 56 species of abalone around the world, but only about 10 to 14 of those species actually support commercial fisheries. And the main harvesting areas for those wild fisheries have been Australia, Japan, New Zealand, South Africa, Mexico, and the United States. So in South Africa, we have about 5 species, but only Haliotis midi, which is what you see there on my left, is harvested commercially. So known locally as the Perlamon, Haliotis midi is endemic to South Africa. Yeah, and it occurs in the intertidal zone of the Western and Southern Cape Oceans. So abalone, just like your typical garden snail, will use their foot to crawl along, which you can see over there, and they'll crawl from place to place. They have characteristic holes along the circumference of one side of their shell, which is used for excreting waste, excretion of waste, breathing, and for reproduction. They're naturally herbivorous animals, and they use their rasp mouth to catch, touch, and feed on seaweeds. And they have a very simple eye structure, which allows them to differentiate between light and dark. South African abalone, as Jacques mentioned in the video, are characteristically white, and they have these wave-like ridges, which you can see here on the image. Historically, there's been serial declines in wild abalone stocks across the world and all major supply countries, and this is due to overexploitation. And South Africa, unfortunately, is no exception to that. However, despite the decline in abundance of abalone worldwide, the supply now exceeds the peak heyday levels that were observed in the 1970s, and this is in part due to the successful production of legal farmed abalone. The commercial wild abalone fishery began in 1945 in an open access fishery in the Western Cape of South Africa. However, unregulated fishing and unsustainable harvesting led to a decline in wild stocks, and this resulted in quota restrictions being implemented. At the end of apartheid, we saw a politically complex reform process, which reallocated rights, and the wild fishery saw increasing regulation, declining stocks, and an increase in illegal catch, which led to the suspension of the wild fishery in 2003. In the early 90s, the demand for South African abalone grew and prices increased radically and opportunities for trade opened. So whilst the illegal fishery grew, it also spurred the commercialization of abalone aquaculture, and the industry developed itself off the coattails of wild abalone stocks depleting, and were able to provide a sustainable solution to a growing demand. So while that was all happening, research on production had begun in about the late 1980s with pre-commercialization trials. Often these were run in the garages of homes through trial and error again, but ultimately this ignited the industry. And so with the growing research, so grew the need for commercialization of the abalone farms. And here you can see some of the image of the starting days of Abergulf, which was known as Hamon's Abalone then. The early days of farming saw that the small animals from the farms were very different, often about 10 times smaller from the wild that were dominating the market at the time, and this limited opportunity. However, production methods evolved and opportunities grew. Unfortunately, the abalone is a species that can be very successfully farmed. So why abalone? I think there are a few people convinced about why abalone from looking at the video there with the recipes. But yeah, as with any other abalone species worldwide, South African abalone are a sought after delicacy in the East and Southeast Asia, as well as in Latin America and France, and of high value. So abalone is praised for its delicate umami flavor. There's also significant cultural importance associated with the animal. It's known to be an elixir of life. It's a symbol of abundance for a new year. And it's often a celebratory food. It's known as a strengthening food. And it's in fact customary to give abalone to your mother-in-law. So chefs and restaurants in Hong Kong introduced the South African abalone to consumers, and this gained more and more popularity. It triggered Australia, Korea, China to the opportunity, and so they began their own abalone aquaculture ventures. However, arguably, South Africa was the pioneer of bringing farmed abalone to the market. The South African abalone is a highly regarded, low-impact species, and whilst we're relatively small, we are quite an established and collaborative industry with lots of room for growth, coupled with a significant amount of history and a lot of institutional knowledge. We are significant employers in our communities, as you also saw in the video, and yeah, we have a lot of room for upskilling our employees, and we're fortunate to have incredible access to wonderful natural waters and environment. So whilst I don't work in production, I'm going to talk a little bit about production. So commercializing abalone as a farm product is quite complex, particularly when one needs to produce within tight margins, as has been the case in the last few years. Abalone farming is very intensive, it's expensive, and it's very slow, with abalone taking anything from 3 to 5 years to reach market size. So in a commercial hatchery, we artificially recreate spawning events through primary broodstock to reach their temperature hours, and we artificially induce spawning. So there's a number of different ways to do this, one being pH changes through chemical intervention, or the use of ultraviolet radiated water. And male and female abalones can be told apart by their gonads. So the male have these cream-colored gonads, while the females have this greeny-blue gonad. We keep the males and the females separate in tanks, and then they spawn, and the eggs and the sperm are released through the breeding holes along the circumference of the shell. And the eggs are siphoned and the sperm's collected, and these are manually fertilized. After fertilization, abalone go through a whole bunch of different developmental stage, and at the juvenile stage, South African abalone start looking for areas where they can settle and be safe. In the commercial hatchery, this will be onto settlement tanks, which are coated with diatoms, as you can see here, to act as an environmental cue for settlement and to provide food. Settled abalone will stay on these racks until they're big enough to be deplated, which is a fancy word for being removed. And then they moved into the nursery. And here they are kept under cones, and they begin this transition from this diatom diet to a predominantly formulated feed or seaweed diet. When the animals grow out, they are now called spat, and they now have reached size. And this can be anything from about 6 to 9 months. And then they moved onto the farm for grow out. So grow out in theory is a bit of a simpler process than the hatchery. There's probably some grow out managers out there who are not very happy with me saying that. Abalone are maintained in land-based tanks with a flow-through system. We have to maintain appropriate stocking densities, make sure we feed appropriately, and ensure there's a clean environment. Again, it's a heavily and intensive process. So just looking at food very quickly, a lot of research has gone into the development of different formulated diets. The industry currently has 2 local feed manufacturers, and feed strategies differ between different operations and the different life stages. And farms will use either seaweeds or formulated feeds or a mix of both, and they kind of alternate between that through the life cycle. So I spoke to stocking density earlier. So some people call it grading, some people call it sorting, but abalone is size sorted on about a 4 to 8 month cycle, depending on your operation. And this helps maintain that stocking density in the basket. So that's favorable for growth and maintains a good animal welfare practices. So the environment is critical for us. So abalone farms operate 24 hours a day, pumps need to pump and blowers need to blow. Air in an abalone tank is integral. It's not there as a source of oxygen. That's what the fresh water is there for, but rather it's for flow. And when I say fresh water, I mean fresh ocean water. Most South African farms are land-based abalone farms, and they use a flow-through system. So they have tanks on land, as you can see here in this image, being pumped on shore to fill these. Tanks are filled with baskets, and that allows for easy handling and easy management. It is quite a labor-intensive process, as the tanks do need to be cleaned frequently, and this helps maintain growth and quality again. So here you can see tank cleaning going on. So regardless of methods, all abalone farms are exposed to environmental challenges. These include sea temperature fluctuations, algal blooms or red tides, storms, seasonal variations, just to name a few. And all of these are big impactors on our growth and quality. So they're very carefully monitored. Impressively, though, the industry has rallied with some wonderfully innovative approaches to most problems, and as such, research is continued and critical to our sustainability. So yeah, just in closing, just a quick Google search shows that there's still a lot to explore with this species compared to some of the other abalone species. This was just looking at hits of journals and articles on Haliotis midi. There's still a lot of research that can be done. But however, abalone doesn't always, it's got its limitations. Because it's such a slow growing species, we can only measure size once they get sorted. So it's difficult to get enough info quickly enough for a lot of research projects and a lot of researchers. But there's certainly lots of opportunity. Andrea spoke to market access being one of those, increasing, improving and developing our markets, product development, consumer awareness, expanding our methods, such as abalone ranching. That's when abalone are put out into the ocean once they've reached a certain size and then harvested later on. Undertaking innovations to improve productivity and reduce our costs. Greening the industry, so embracing traceability, sustainability, certification, and mitigating and tackling environmental and social risks associated with changes in climate change, as an example, and other sustainability concerns. Yeah, so that's me, and I hope that gave you a good overview of abalone.
Sarah, thank you very much. Sarah, before I let you go, did you ever think that you would be working in abalone research when you grew up?
No, I was going to go save the dolphins. I actually always said I'll never get into aquaculture, and I did, and I'm absolutely loving it. So
great. Great. Sarah, thank you very much for that interesting presentation on the production side of things. Sarah, I'm sure there are going to be questions coming through. So we're going to carry on with the rest of our talks, and then anybody that does want to ask a question of Sarah on what she's presented, please put it in the Q&A panel. We'll see those questions and we'll try and come back to them. I see there have been several people asking for contact details. We will share contact details at the end of the webinar. I see there's some very interesting discussions around, I think it's Khalid saying, please come and farm in the Red Sea in the Sudan, asking for partnership with people to set up there. You can pick that up in the chat panel. So a lot of interesting discussion taking place. The key question, however, is when we've grown these abalone, can we actually sell them? So aquaculture is nothing if we can't move the product. And to give us a little bit of insight around the markets and marketing of abalone, we are honored to have Tian Prim, who is the chair of the Abalone Export Council, with us. I see Tian has already shared his screen. So Tian, welcome and thank you for your time. I'm going to give the floor over to you. Thanks, Tian.
Thank you, Etienne, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you. Thank you to South Africa and Aqua Africa magazine for making this possible. So yeah, great to be with you. Just a quick overview of the South African or background on South African Abalone Export Council. It's a non-profit organization. It's member funded. Most of the abalone farms and producers belong to the South African Abalone Export Council. It is obviously voluntary if you want to join or not. It's self-funded, and then we also get our funding is matched by the DTI, a government trade organization in South Africa. Whatever we fund, they fund times two. So I'm relatively new to the industry, but as you've seen, fantastic what has happened in the past 20-25 years here, and and as we go through the market, I hope you also realize what impact South African abalone has had, as Sarah rightly said, as farmed abalone across the world. So my presentation is basically in 3 parts, to understand the market. The global market is basically the first point. I mentioned there's many, Japan, China, New Zealand, Australia, the Mexicans, the Americans, so a lot of producers. So that's the first bit. The second bit of my presentation, I would just like to talk about, where does South African abalone go in the world? And then thirdly, why South African abalone? And I think Jacques from the video and Sarah touched on some of those points, the provenance of our product, what a good product we have, and how it's appreciated in the market. So let's get going. A lot of information here on this slide, but context is that the global ranking of who's the importer. So the source of this data is from the WITS, Worldwide Integrated Trade Solutions. So they measure how abalone cross borders. So very importantly, this stats here shows obviously not local consumption of abalone, because that doesn't cross a border logically. So you can see, if we take the whole abalone market, this is not just South Africa, but the whole worldwide abalone market. Hong Kong is our biggest market. This data is updated till 2021, and 2022 is not out, and you can still see there's still missing data from 2021, the yellow blocks. But in summary of this, I'm not going to read verbatim, each and every my comments there at the top. Hong Kong is a big, let's say, consumer of importer, and obviously consumer of abalone. Japan, Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore, China. Remember, this is what gets into China. China's got a massive local market that's obviously not reported in this numbers. United States is important. South Korea, Macau, basically part of China, Canada, so the North Americas. And then there's Bulgaria, very interestingly, not part of the EU, and then Italy and Spain, is also importers of abalone. You can see that in 2020, specifically 2021, some of these countries have taken a bit of a dip, and let's put it down to the COVID size. But in general, this gives us an overview of where the abalone goes and crosses borders in the world. Just for clarity, that's sales weight and harvest weight. You know, we sell products to be much less, but you know, that gives us a good understanding where does what go. So lots of data here. The data, you know, paints a picture. There's obviously lots of data behind this as well, but you know, this analyzes the country of origin for each format of abalone. You know, again, only up till 2021. We can see that China and Australia are the primary origins of frozen abalone, so very big in frozen abalone. The Chileans as well, the top three. Then live abalone, here's where South Africa is starting to feature. Korea is the biggest, predominantly all South Korea's abalone goes to Japan. It's just across the channel. But South Africa was quite big, the 1,000 tons plus in 2021 already. Then the Australians are quite big in the live abalone, and then the Chinese also export a lot of live abalone. And then dried abalone, top three countries that export. So again, the Chinese, their products are Africa, very big in the dried abalone. Zambia, and that's the sticky one. That's the illicit abalone that travels through that route. And then out of Hong Kong, once it's imported, you know, it's Hong Kong is used as a base to export it then to different, as a free trade area, then to mostly America or Canada. Then canned, you know, completely dominated by Chinese canned, Taiwan as well, and Australia is quite big in the in New Zealand and South Africa, you know, very similar. So the message for the information from this, you know, shows us that South Africa is a large player in, our species is a large player in the live product and the dried product specifically. And this is all Medea, our species. So quite a good presence in the dried market as well. All right, so the second part of my presentation, so country of origin, South Africa. So who imports our product? You know, where does this wonderful product of us go? And we can again, you know, make four, you know, products, you know, canned, dried, live, and frozen. And our canned product into Hong Kong. Three, our dried product definitely Hong Kong. Then a live product also Hong Kong and Taiwan and China. That's top three markets where South African abalone goes into, the live abalone, and then frozen, not very big, into Hong Kong and China. You can see that we've added on the VITS data, we've analyzed the pricing. You can see the massive effect that COVID had, for instance, on canned pricing in 20 and 2021. You know, the pricing halved. You saw the reduction in pricing here as well, from 30 to 26 in the live. But very interestingly, what happened in the dried market, as routes were closed because of COVID, more of the farmed abalone, which is higher prices, entered into the market since 2021, and you can see the delta between that prices and even into China. All right, so now we know where our products are going to, what's our major markets, what's the products, where they go. Then I think Sarah spoke to this already. You know, why is abalone firstly important to the Chinese, Cantonese, and for other developing you know, palates in the East? Why is it important? You know, it's part of the four traditional high-end ingredients, treasures of the seas for Chinese diet. Abalone, sea cucumber, shark fin, and fish maw is the four of them. You know, it's a product through our market research that we do It's a product that's not easily replaceable. It's a very, from the comments we get through studies that we do through Nielsen's or reputable consultants in our markets. So it's a very special product. Again, as Sarah said, families, that's why I put up the picture there, it's part of their celebration. It's good to know that your product is not easily replaceable. But I also get to, how things are evolving and where the risk and opportunities are in our products. Okay. Then if we look at the provenance of South African abalone in market studies that we've done, say, of our dried product in mainland China, this is the immediate feedback that we get. It's important for our customers to know where our product is coming from. South African, Australian, Japanese, and Middle East dried product is very prevalent. Important, good quality in mainland China specifically. And then the live product here, they use their own product, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. And this tells us also that there's a massive opportunity for the South African producers to get into the live market because we've got such a good product. So I think we're understanding our market much better, and continued research leads us to do things better as well. All right. And then the typical supply chain, if we take into our main markets, Hong Kong and China, basically family, the consumer driven. There's a local retailer or restaurant, hotels, wholesaler. There's large distributors that sits in mainland China or in Hong Kong or just in Hong Kong, and then the demand flows through. Important point here is that there's a lot of market education that's still to be done to make it more of to build brands and the South African brand as a preference, to boost demand. Where I think traditionally we're still in that curve of where it's more of a pull as a push from the industry. All right. I've just, the presentation won't be shared. And for those people that want to read the details and the comments of people that we interviewed and whatever, but important here is the dried product, is still up there. The issue with quality, the issue with the dried product is that there's a possibility of the skill gets lost how to prepare it. It's quite a difficult, not difficult, but it's a long time to process it, to get it onto a plate from the dried format, being, with broths and rehydrating. The live abalone remains very popular, and then the canned abalone, you're ready to eat, but it also has, in China specifically, a perception of being a cheap product. So new product development, again, as Sarah said, we need to take that on board. Ready to eat products is, for the faster pace living. But yeah, in all, I think we've got a fantastic product. I think we've got a fantastic product mix that has different characteristics and has a different benefit through different cycles, economic cycles. So it helps with the diversification of our farms and how we manage our businesses as well. So yeah, thanks to Etienne. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Great. Tiaan, very interesting presentation. I've actually got a lot of questions myself, but watching the clock, we've got about 35 minutes left. So I want to get on with the program. If I see there are questions coming into the Q&A panel, please keep your questions coming. There's some interesting stuff coming through, and we'll certainly try and answer as many of those as we can. Johan, I'm just going to run my presentation quickly before we get to you. You're a little bit fast out of the blocks for me, and then we'll get to your presentation. So on with the program. I'm due on next just to give you a short overview of the Trade Forward Southern Africa work that was done not only for abalone, but across the mussel and oyster sector as well. So today is the first of 3 webinars. Next week's webinar will deal with mussels. And then in the week after that, we will have a webinar on oysters. Now, these webinars today, next week, and the week after have been made possible by Trade Forward Southern Africa. You heard of SIM at the start. In this week's webinar, I'm briefly going to talk just around export necessity. There's no rocket science there. We know products of high value have to be exported. Then next week, I'll do a little bit more of a look at the compliance roadmap that was developed by Trade Forward Southern Africa. And then in the third webinar, when we discuss oysters, I'm going to look around the recommendations, challenges, and opportunities that were developed through the TFSA work, and also at some secondary interventions or secondary assistance that was provided by TFSA or Trade Forward Southern Africa. Essentially, the work that was done revolved around meeting of standards and regulations to access EU or European Union markets with Southern African aquaculture products. Now, I always get asked, well, if all of the abalone is being exported to the Far East, who's going to eat abalone in Europe? The fact of the matter is there's a growing diaspora of Chinese and Japanese and Vietnamese people in Europe which regard abalone quite highly and which do create a market in the EU as well. For cultural reasons, the market for mussels and oysters in Europe is potentially greater than for abalone, but this work certainly concentrated on all of the farmed shellfish in South Africa. The work consisted of a broader package. I'm not going to go into the detail, but there was work around tilapia, promoting the tilapia sector in Mozambique, and the work around shellfish spilled over into Namibia as well. Namibia also farms oysters, mussels, and to a lesser extent abalone, and some of the export work was done for Namibia as well. So really, if we look at exporting South African aquaculture products, as I say, no rocket science here. There's a necessity to do it. And this necessity is born out of the fact that the local market is finite. It's only that big. And for products like abalone, which do not have a strong cultural following in South Africa, the export market becomes essential. There's also there's shifts in the market, changing market requirements that drive the need for new export markets, such as Europe, as I've just explained. There's also a lot of international competition, as Tian has pointed out. And if we are not competing in that market, we certainly do our industry a disfavor. We need to compete there, not only abroad, but we also need to compete locally so that exporters of shellfish that are farmed in other countries do not dominate our markets. And I think particularly of a product like mussels, where South Africa imports quite a lot of mussels against the backdrop that we have a local mussel producing sector. And then I don't have to explain the limitations of a single point of offtake. Our abalone industry is quite dependent on a few offtake points in the Far East, and certainly diversification of those offtake points creates more opportunity and safety and security for the industry. There's lots of opportunities and lots of potential on the right-hand side column. The taste patterns of consumers change over time. Modern palates all over the world are looking for new products. I'm sure those of you that watch the video will want to go and try abalone as a product. So certainly there's potential and opportunities to see abalone and other farmed shellfish go to other parts of the world. There are potentially increased returns from exporting to markets abroad. I say potentially because there are also high costs, logistical costs to get products abroad. And certainly if we have a greater market access, it does advantage local small and medium business, and it creates a more inclusive industry so that that industry can collectively supply to the demand. And then lastly, it earns foreign currency. And for all African countries, earning foreign currency is certainly of primary importance. I've often used this slide. I go around the world saying that I think Aristotle was into aquaculture, because aquaculture takes a lot of thinking, not only the production side, but certainly finding the right markets and making those markets work for the product. This very complicated diagram was produced by Rabobank a while ago. And I don't want to run through any of the data on this diagram. I just want to illustrate to you that this shows the flow of seafood across the world. And you can see in Europe at the top, there's a big pink arrow that represents the flow of salmon. Then the big blue arrow from South America across to the Far East is also mainly salmon, but a lot of other products. And the important thing here to show is that South Africa does not feature on this, this world map of seafood flows. There's a small arrow from Namibia, and certainly the volumes we hope in the future will increase to such an extent that South Africa starts featuring on this flow of product. Interestingly, you can see the rest of Africa faces the same dilemma. We are very, very marginal participants in global seafood trade. So on with Aristotle. To create a sustainable export demand for abalone or other farmed shellfish, it's not as simple as just looking at what market price can be obtained abroad. There needs to be a careful consideration of cost-effective transport logistics. We know where fuel costs and energy costs are going. Certainly it creates a big carbon footprint to take abalone from South Africa to the Far East, and all of those aspects have to be considered. I've spoken briefly about competition and new competition. You saw from Tian's presentation that it's not as simple as entering the Chinese market and expecting them to take up everything that can be produced. There is real competition with locally produced products and with products from elsewhere in the world. We all understand the volume game. Markets abroad seldomly are interested in small volume buying. You know that there are wholesalers that take up these products in the international markets. And this volume game is a game which the abalone industry has got right, but for small startup aquaculture industries, it's really a challenge when they want to enter the international market. And then lastly, there's the cost of compliance to be able to serve these international markets. There's no secret that increasing barriers to trade are being put in place by many countries in the world. And those barriers of trade are not always to protect local production. Sometimes they are to safeguard food safety standards. But regardless of what the underlying reasons are, these barriers of trade create stumbling blocks for local production. So around this background, the interventions that were made in the Trade Forward Southern Africa work was to come up with details and guidelines around what the compliance requirements for the European Union are. There was also a review done of the shellfish monitoring programs in South Africa and Namibia. And then there were 2 compliance roadmaps that were developed and circulated into the industry and into other role players such as government. These are the covers of these roadmaps that were developed around EU compliance. And in this first webinar, I'm not going to dig into any major content details. The nuts and bolts of these compliance frameworks or roadmaps will be discussed in next week's webinar. I can just maybe give you a little taster. The compliance to EU regulations for the export of shellfish from South Africa really rests on 4 pillars. There's a food safety pillar that demands compliance in terms of the safety of the product for human consumption. There is a veterinary drug residue monitoring pillar that looks at which drugs are used and the residues of those drugs. There's aquatic animal health pillar that obviously looks at the aquatic animal health management procedures. And then lastly, these animals being farmed in the marine environment means that there is a marine biotoxin and microbiological pillar, particularly around mussels and oysters that we'll discuss in the coming weeks, and not so much around abalone. So that's really the story from my side in this first webinar around the work from TFSA. I've repeated on several occasions that there's a webinar next week on mussels, in which I'll unpack some of those roadmaps that were developed. And then in the week after that, we'll have a discussion on oysters, and we'll continue to unpack this material. The webinar next week on mussels, if you want to register for it, the QR code is there. You can literally pick up your smartphone, scan that code, and it takes you to the registration page. There is a URL link as well. I have shared the link in the chat panel. I will share it again. So join us when we discuss mussels next week. And then in the week after that, we'll be discussing oysters, and I will deal with more of the Trade Forward Southern African work. Again, if you've got a smartphone, you can scan that code. I can also tell you that by tomorrow in your email, you will have the registration link. So if you miss it now, don't panic. You can certainly get that link in your email tomorrow. So that's the end of my presentation. Just introduction to the work that was done by Trade Forward Southern Africa. I do see there are still questions coming through. We have about, if I look at the clock, about 25 minutes left. As important as the role is of government and the work that Trade Forward Southern Africa has done, and the work that Tian and his team is doing at the Abalone Export Council, there is also the critically important work that is done by the Abalone Farmers Association of South Africa. Before I invite Johan to tell us a little bit about the association and their work, I do want to launch a short poll just with a few questions. I think there's 5 or 6 questions that will come up onto your screen now. Most of these questions are multiple choice, so it will take you just a few minutes to complete, or a minute or so. I think the second question the third question, I think one of them is a multiple choice. Sorry, I'm not sure which one it is, but you'll see the poll that has come up onto your screen. Please complete that poll. This webinar has been made possible by TFSA, and the results of this poll are really important to inform their work going forward. It informs them where they can next provide guidance and assistance to the sector. And for that reason, I'm really encouraging you to answer the questions on that short poll. I'll leave that poll up for a little while. I'll also share the results of the poll at the end. While that is running, I'm going to invite Johan onto the stage. Johan Hackroot does fantastic work in the background for the abalone sector, and Johan is going to tell us a little bit more. Johan, it's over to you. You're welcome to share your screen.
Thanks, Etienne. Sorry for jumping in there. I was hoping to evade load shedding here, which would have allowed me a nice big screen to read from, because the eyesight's not so great anymore. But here we go. So AFASA, who are we? Voluntary Association, not for gain, a non-profit organization registered under the Non-Profit Organizations Act, and consequently a body corporate with an existence separate from its members and office bearers. It is established to pursue the objectives and conduct its affairs in accordance with the Constitution. Just see if this was now the load shedding. Let me just try again. Right. Okay, so we have a constitution. We have 5 duly elected council members, including a chairman. We have a CEO and a secretariat that involves themselves with strategic and day-to-day management of the association. Accountant for monthly financials, and we actually do an annual audit as well. So these are our members. We've got 12 members. Some of them have more than one farm, so this won't tally to 12, but there they are. I'm not going to run through them. Collectively, these farms have a capacity of about 3,000 tons, selling annually into the market about 2,500 tons, total employment of 1,500, and then a turnover of plus minus 1.4 billion rand. Just incidentally, I just want to hook on to what Tian said is so those 3,000 tons are matched by poached abalone from the wild, and it is something that does concern all the stakeholders in the sector. So just a quick one. There we are. So on the top right, between Honderklip Bay and Alexandria Bay, we've got some ranching areas. This is where the abalone is actually farmed in the sea and not off land, although there is one operation there that farms on land. We've got some farms here on the west coast and Dorang Bay, and then we've got quite a number. The majority of volume actually sits here in the southwest coast, and then we've got one lone rider out to the east there. Richard Clark's the owner and CEO. Company's called Wild Coast Abalone, and then he's also got a small ranching area there in the Port Elizabeth area. So the objectives really is to establish communication and cooperation amongst the members of the association, to assist the regulatory bodies with industry compliance to laws, regulations, and monitoring programs, consult with the regulatory bodies on changes to the regulatory framework, communicate national and international compliance requirements with the industry. We serve as a platform for market discussions according to the conditions of the Competition Commission exemption. We represent the industry on various forums, both public and private. We assume membership of related associations, and then we also try to procure funds and apply such funds for the furtherance of the stated objectives. And I can just mention here at this point, pause quickly, I just want to thank Sim and his colleagues for helping us to map the roadmap, to establish a roadmap for EU compliance. We're all very excited. We've got a couple of hurdles that we need to cross, but we're confident that we ultimately going to break into the European and the UK market. I want to specifically mention the UK market because I know much of the funding also comes from the UK. So yeah, and then we've also got some funding that was provided for some research from Innovate UK. So yeah, we certainly are grateful for the contributions. We hope that we can deliver the goods in the near future. I'm confident we have a well-oiled industry, and we have people that occupy positions in the regulatory bodies that are hardworking and certainly are helping us to break those barriers that is facing us specifically with regards to compliance and regulations. So then just a quick one. Currently, our regulatory framework is guided by the Marine Living Resources Act. From the Marine Living Resources Act flows regulations, and then out of the regulations we have established the South African Shellfish Monitoring and Control Program. And in the control program is enforced through permit conditions. And so in total, quite a complex and comprehensive regulatory framework that takes quite a bit to comply to, but I think we're not doing too badly. And then just on top of that, there's a number of other acts that come into play and regulations that come into play. There's some environmental acts number of them. There's the Animal Disease Act. There's the Fertilizers, Farm Feeds, Agricultural Remedies and Stock Remedies Act. There's the Medicines and Related Substance Act, National Health Act, Foodstuff, Cosmetics and Disinfectant Act, and the National Regulator for Compliance Specifications Act. So yeah, a mouthful if you want to engage and be compliant. All those four pillars that Etienne referred to: food safety, veterinary, residues, animal health, and then the marine biotoxins and E. coli, microbiologicals. So yeah, that's on the regulatory side, and then also just yeah, because there's huge pressure on this industry to comply, to succeed in exporting to the EU. The industry, the sector, together with the regulators, are in the process of developing an Aquaculture Development Act. We were hoping to get it through Parliament this year. It seems unlikely, but in that act, I think we are covering all the bases, and we're going to make sure that we will be ultimately EU compliant, so that we can enter those markets, be it just to service the Chinese and the other Eastern cultures there. I'm sure it's going to rub off to the rest of Europeans and also to the EU, to the UK. Etienne, that's me. Thanks.
Great, Johan, thank you for that presentation. Interesting dynamic. You know, I was listening to you at the end, and you're saying you hope it rubs off to other communities in Europe. I hope there's not many French people online, but I've seen those French people eat stuff a lot funnier than abalone. So I'm 100% sure there's a market in Europe. Johan, thanks for that. Interesting insights. I see we have about 15 minutes left. Many of the questions have been answered online by my fellow panel members. I see here's one question from Senior asking, are there any non-tariff barriers for the Far East? Senior, I'm going to give you my opinion, and I'm happy to take one of the other panel members if they want to comment, maybe Tian. So Senior, we used to in the past see the Far East as a market with very little non-tariff barriers, but that's changing. So even the Far Eastern markets are increasingly putting non-tariff barriers in place, both as a protection of their own industry and also to advance their own industry and their own products. So that's my opinion. I think non-tariff barriers will play an increasing part in all world markets. And maybe Tian, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, you're definitely right by saying that. So in our Eastern markets, it's only China that has tariff barriers for South African product. But Hong Kong and Macau, which is basically what's the word, zones of China, they don't have. They're free trade zones, so no barriers there. No barriers in Singapore, Malaysia. The relationship that South Africa has with America through the ALCOA agreement, I think, also no import duties. So basically, the one that we have that stands out is duties on our product into mainland China, and it could be for various reasons, protecting their own product because they're quite a big producer themselves. But interestingly, somebody like Australia would not have any barriers for their abalone into China, mainland China. So it is possible, to obviously get free trade going, on a political level. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Tian. We've all known that these webinars, there's always a gremlin somewhere. There's always something that goes wrong somewhere. And I can tell you what went wrong in this webinar is, for some reason, the incorrect poll was launched. But that doesn't matter. The questions are quite generic. My apologies. It actually says at the top of the poll, it says Aquatrans Webinar 3. But the questions are still valuable. The answers are still valuable. I see we've got an 83% participation rate in the poll. So if you haven't yet answered those 3 or 4 questions, please do so. Let's see if we can get that up to a 90% response rate. And then as soon as we hit 90, I'll share the results of that poll. Then a couple of other questions that came through. You're welcome to go and have a look at them. There was one question on how people can visit abalone farms. Sarah answered that for us. I think, Sarah, you mentioned a company that can be contacted to arrange visits to abalone farms. These abalone farms are mainly Western Cape based, like Johan explained. Then there was a question around where the data, Tian, where you got your data from. That has been answered online as well. And I do know that Trade Forward Southern Africa has a very extensive data access, international trade data access platform. We've actually had one of their people in a previous meeting with us. I might see if we can get him online again. Sim, do you want to comment on that? Maybe you can just give us one sentence around the trade statistics that TFSA have available. Sim, can you comment on that?
Hi, Etienne. Well, I
Yes,
currently do not have them handy with me, but what I could possibly do, because I've got all those details here, we could get my team, my colleagues, to actually share that kind of information with you. My apologies for that. But
no
again,
problem, Sim.
I think what's also important is that on our TFSA-southernafrica.org website, we actually have our tools there that are sitting there that can actually help with some of this information. So if people have time, you can just go through there and just play around with those tools. You could actually be able to pick up quite a lot of information in terms of your most attractive markets and whatever you need to do as an exporter. So I'd really urge people to go there, but I'll get my team as well to just come back and get feedback on that particular question. I took note of it.
Excellent. Thank you, Sim. We'll try and get somebody to just give us more data in next week's webinar as well. There was a question around feeding, which Sarah has answered online. Thank you, Sarah, around the feeding of abalone. There was also a question around whether abalone is only a food product. That was answered online. If I can try and get to the last questions. There was a question from Blessing on poaching. That has been answered. Then there were questions around the presentation slides. The links to that will be shared in your email tomorrow. And then Veronica Alphonse is asking, are the feed products produced in South Africa? So abalone feed, I wonder who I can hand this to. Sarah, can I maybe come to you? Abalone feed, is it produced in South Africa, Sarah?
Hi, Etienne. Yeah, there are 2 feed companies in South Africa, Marry Feed and Specialized Aquatic Feed, or SAF. And they both produce.
Great, thank you for that, Sarah. We're on 86% on the poll, so thank you for those of you that have answered the questions. I'm closing the poll now, and I will share the results with you. You can have a look at it on your screen while we close off this webinar. We've got another few minutes left, and in these last 2 or 3 minutes, I want to do the following. I'm going to ask each one of the panel members to just make a final comment around the abalone industry and perhaps on their views on the way forward. And then I will be sharing the email addresses of all of the panel members as we close down. For final comments and closing, maybe let's start. Tian, can we start with you? Just your final comments before we go?
Yeah, thanks, Etienne. You know, again, thanks for the opportunity. I think as an industry, we still have a lot to do, and in marketing our product and protecting the provenance, the value of our product across the world. We've got such a great product, and that will require more collaboration between the industry players. You know, I think that's my parting shot. You know, so yeah, thanks. And then if we do that, I think developing new markets is going to be so much easier if we maintain that premier status product of us. And I know there's a lot of competition from different countries and species, but we really got a good product going here. The market tells us that. So yeah, I'm quite positive. If we sort that out, the sky's the limit. Thank you.
Excellent. Nice, encouraging words to close off there, Tian. Next up, final comments, Sarah, just your final parting shot.
I think I'm a little bit biased here because I've probably got the most exciting job out of everyone. I've been in research. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of exciting things that can still happen in the abalone sector. And like I mentioned in the presentation, there's a lot of room for growth. And as Tian says, we do have a great product. We've got a sustainable product, and yeah, it's exciting to see where it's going to go.
Excellent. Great. Thank you for that, Sarah. Johan, your final word of wisdom for us.
Thanks, Etienne. Thanks for arranging this again. Yeah, just on the compliance side, it certainly, we've got brilliant farms. That's an understatement. Well-oiled machines. We've got a regulatory infrastructure that is certainly positioning itself to allow us to gain access to other markets. And yeah, the call is just that we work together as a country, all the stakeholders, and exploit the opportunities. We've got challenges, we've got geopolitical challenges, we've got challenges at home politically, we've got an electricity crisis, but even with all of that, I remain positive. And I'm sure that we are going to, when we have this session again in 2 to 3 years' time, we'll see some progress. Thanks.
Excellent, Johan, for those last words. Andrea, you've been sitting quietly since the opening. Your final words before we go.
This is just proof, Etienne, that government officials do sit in the office past 4 o'clock. No, I think just to, Johan took the words out of my mouth. If we're trying to grow a sector, everyone has their roles and responsibilities, but if we're not collaborating around that, we're not going to move forward. So that's a key thing. And maybe just a plug in on the feed question, because there was a question around feed as well. We're also part of an exciting project that is looking at farming kelp, which is also funded by UK aid through the FCDO. So there is a lot of exciting developments, and obviously kelp is a very important feed aspect around Abalone farm and securing production going forward. So thank you, Etienne, thank you TFSA for your support as well, and then obviously the farmers for the collaboration that we've got going on. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. This webinar was made possible by TFSA. Sim, you've got the honor to give us a last parting shot. And thank you from my side, Sim, that you guys made this possible. Sim, your last words.
Thank you very much, Etienne. I really appreciate you giving me a chance to speak. I think after all this spoken about the sector, it's a disservice that I speak last, but I really want to thank you, Etienne, as our partner that we worked with as TFSA. Thank you, my fellow panelists, Andrea, Johan, Sarah. Thank you so much for the expert conversations we've had in this webinar today. I think as TFSA, really our big win here is the collaborative effort that we're seeing amongst players in the sector. And for us, it's a big win. The whole idea really is to increase exports, alleviate poverty in our region. And especially as we say, we really deliberate about helping out women. We do have activities that going forward for the next extended year, where we'll be looking to really help women-owned, women-managed organizations to access exports. So we're really looking forward to these collaborations. And again, Thank you to all the participants. I think the interactions were great. It does show that the sector is growing and it's going to be feeding us in the future. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Etienne.
Excellent. Thank you, Sim. We are on time. We don't like running these webinars for more than 90 minutes. Good afternoon to you from Aquaculture Africa magazine. We will soon be known as Aquaculture Africa Media. Please join us in the mussel webinar next week. Look out in your email for the link to register for that. And we'll be talking oysters in the week after that. To my fellow panel members, thank you. It's been fun having you on this afternoon. Thank you to everybody that has joined us. I will leave these email addresses on for a little while if you want to jot them down, and enjoy the rest of your day where you are. We hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.